One of the points that I'm constantly trying to make on this show is that there are no good guys. In Congress, in Washington, D.C., there are no good guys. Nobody is looking out for you. Nobody is going to come and save you. The corporate Democrats, the Republicans, the establishment, the only thing that they've done in the last 8 months during the worst crisis in U.S. history is a corporate scam, a heist that gave $5 trillion to the largest corporations and the richest people in the country. And everybody else got scraps, got crumbs, if you got anything at all. And it's been 8 months. And now they're negotiating a stimulus bill with no stimulus checks. Even the elected progressives who claim to support the policy positions that we do, the policies that will help the American people, that will bail out the American public in the worst economic crisis in history. Even these elected progressives, their hands aren't clean in this either. They all voted for that corporate scam CARES Act. They knew what was in that shit. I knew. If some loudmouth asshole on YouTube and every other lefty on Twitter knew what was in that corporate scam CARES Act, they knew what was in it. It's their fucking job to know what was in it. And they voted for it anyway. The largest upward transfer of wealth in human history. And they voted for it. They voted to fleece the public and give them nothing in the middle of a crisis. And they didn't even fight their leadership on it. They went along and voted for it with no serious opposition. So not only did they go along with the obscene corporate bailout that was the CARES Act, now for the last 8 months, they've participated in the theater and pretending like, and the partisan bickering, every single thing is they try to blame it on the Republicans, and knowing what that does, they know that it's just continues this perpetual partisan bickering. It's the other side whose fault it is, and the Republicans will say it's the Democrats' fault, and they're going to keep going around in circles doing this. But in reality, the problem is the establishment. It's both parties. They're both fucking over the public. They both left us for dead in the middle of a crisis. The elected progressives know this, but they won't actually speak the truth. They won't say the truth about what the reality is of the situation, because they don't want to offend the leadership of the Democratic Party. They don't want to be on the bad side of Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden. So they pretend like everything is just the Republicans. And like I said, that's not helping anybody at this point. So they'll all go out and flap their gums on Twitter about, oh, we should get stimulus checks. We should have monthly recurring checks for everybody in the country. We should get Medicare for all. But they aren't doing anything. They aren't using the power that they have as sitting members of Congress to make those policies a reality. So they're useless. And like I said, they aren't going to save the day. Which brings me to the topic of this video. So Bernie Sanders did an interview with the Young Turks, and he was asked a question about whether or not he supports direct action and a general strike to put public pressure on the politicians so that they do these policies that we need, so that they do a UBI, monthly recurring checks, to everybody, so that they have rent, they pass rent and debt cancellation and actual eviction moratorium, a ban on evictions. Pressure politicians so that they pass Medicare for all in the middle of a fucking deadly pandemic where almost a third of the country can't afford healthcare. So they asked Bernie Sanders about whether or not he's going to support a general strike or direct action or anything like that. And his answer was very telling. He did this typical politician tap dance around the question where he talked, but he wasn't really saying anything, and completely avoided the topic of general strike and direct action. So that's very telling. Right now, at this moment, that is the only option, only card left up our sleeve to play so that we get those policies. And Bernie Sanders, somebody who was the leader of the the populist left movement in this country won't even get on board with it. So he's throwing up his hands, he's waving the white flag, and he's saying, well, we aren't going to get anything, and I'm not going to do anything to get it. And I have a lot to say about that. But before I get into that, you guys already know the deal. I love doing the show for you guys, but in order for me to keep doing it, it needs to be sustainable. So if you can contribute to the show financially, I have a link to my Patreon in the About page on my YouTube channel. I also have a link to my PayPal in the About page on my YouTube channel. And I'm incredibly grateful for all the people who've contributed over the last few weeks and the last few months, because you guys are showing me that you appreciate the work that I do. And because of you guys, I get to do what I love. So I can never put into words how grateful I am for you guys. So if you want to contribute to the show, the links are on the About page of the YouTube channel. Now, I have the clip from the interview. It's about 1.5 minutes long. I'm going to play it, and then we'll come back and break it down.
It really is quite amazing to me the degree to which my Republican colleagues are very worried about corporations getting protection for irresponsible behavior in terms of the coronavirus and getting their workers sick. They're very worried about that. But when children in America go hungry, when working people are going to get evicted from their apartments, when people have no health insurance, it is incredible how there is a blind eye to that suffering. And we've got to get people to stand up. I mean, this is one of the things I'm working on right now, why I'm on the show right now. Hey, folks out there, if you think it is important that the government does the right thing for working people, get on the phone, call up your representative, call up your senator, and tell them that if we could bail out Wall Street, we give corporate welfare to the fossil fuel industry, we could protect the working families of this country in this terrible moment.
Senator Sanders, calling your lawmakers, demanding change, demanding action, unfortunately hasn't yielded the results that Americans have been hoping for, the results that Americans need. And so there have been a lot of conversations among the left regarding what can be done to win on these issues. And one of the things that I've noticed is that even in red states like Alabama, you have Amazon workers who are working to unionize. In other debates among leftist circles, you're hearing arguments about how we need to really organize and approach this with a possible general strike. I wanted to get your thoughts on those actions. Do you think that that's a good strategy to move forward and demand change among congressional lawmakers?
Well, I think we need to mobilize the grassroots of this country and working people in general. What you didn't mention, Anna, is that in Florida, a state where Trump won by, I think, 3 points, the minimum wage passed by, I think it was 10 points. The agenda that we are fighting for, healthcare for all, is a human right through Medicare for all, creating millions of jobs through a Green New Deal, rebuilding our infrastructure, canceling student debt. Do you know what? Those are popular ideas. And we've got to get candidates out there who are prepared to stand up and fight for those ideas, and grassroots organizations to organize people to support those candidates.
All right, so first of all, he says, he tries to, again, blame it all on the Republicans. All the Republicans are more concerned about corporations than they are about people. They're more concerned about giving the corporate liability shield than they are about people starving in lines across the country, being people about to be evicted across the country. The Republicans care more about corporations than people. So again, that's the framing, that's the partisan framing that just keeps this, that perpetuates this theater, this facade that is always the other side, but your side's good, but it's the other side that's bad. And it just makes this unnecessary partisan divide in the country. Just speak the truth. He won't speak the truth because he knows that that Democrats are just as much in the pocket of corporations. They care just as little about the regular people in this country as the Republicans. Bernie Sanders knows this. He's been in fucking politics for 30 years. He knows that, but he won't say it. And then he, at the end of his answer before the general strike question, he says, oh yeah, go and call your representatives. Go and call your fucking representatives. Calling your representative is not going to do anything. That isn't enough. sorry to say, it isn't enough. Is it a tool? Maybe a tool you can use in a broader strategy of direct action? Sure. But to tell them to just go call the representatives, that won't do anything because they don't care. They know people are starving. They know people are unemployed with no income. They know people are about to be evicted. Millions. They know 60% of businesses that have closed permanently. They know all of this, but they don't care. They're serving their own self-interest and the interest of their wealthy and corporate donors. So calling them and explaining to them what's happening isn't going to move them because they know. They already know. So this is more of what I like to call useless activism. Or aimless activism, to basically have people get all in on something that will ultimately make no difference in their life. Calling you a representative isn't going to get you UBI. It's not going to get you Medicare for all. But these elected progressives, they like to go and tell people to do this shit to make it seem like, oh yeah, you guys can. It's just up to you. It's all up to you to just, you got to let these politicians know that these are the policies you want, and then they'll do it. That's not reality. That's not how it actually works. So it leads to the question about the general strike, because even Anna knows this is bullshit. Calling representatives isn't going to get you anything. So she says, people have been doing this for a while. It hasn't worked. That's why people are talking about other forms of direct action. People are talking about unionization, and people are talking about strikes and general strikes. So what do you think about that? And then what does Bernie Sanders do? Like I said, leader of this grassroots, he's not the leader anymore. He ain't the leader of shit anymore. He was the leader of this large, unprecedented grassroots populist leftist movement in this country. And he could have people organized for a strike, for a protest, hundreds of thousands at a time if he wanted to. The week he announced that he was running for president in 2020, he had 1 million people sign up to volunteer. That's the kind of army Bernie Sanders had at his disposal. So if anybody can get a general strike organized, it would be somebody like Bernie Sanders, right? So when he's asked about this, guess what he does? Dodges it. And dodges it in such a, like, the stereotypical sleazy politician way. Because if you asked any regular person on the street, hey, do you support a general strike? How would they respond? Either they agree with you and they tell you why they would agree with you, or they tell you they don't agree with the general strike and they'll tell you why they don't agree with the general strike. Some might have a shorter answer, some might have a more nuanced answer. What did Bernie Sanders do? Like a typical lying ass politician, completely dodges it. Goes reading talking points that have absolutely nothing to do with the question. Why? Because he knows he doesn't support it, but he wants to avoid the backlash that he would get if he just came out and told the truth about it. He came out and said, hey, I know I'm pretending to be this revolutionary leftist in Congress, in the Senate, but I don't support the one and only tool that the public has right now to get what they want. He knows he can't say that without getting immense backlash from the left. So instead, he goes and does this incredibly disingenuous, sleazy ass politician trick, which is talking in circles and saying a bunch of words, not really saying anything, and completely avoiding the question. So all the people who think Bernie Sanders is a man of great integrity and above reproach, and he's a truth teller, he's an honest politician. No, he's just like every other lying ass politician. If you're not really up on politics, if you don't follow this stuff inside and out, you could have got caught up in that, because she asked him very specifically, what do you think about general strike? And then he goes on this long-winded tangent that has absolutely nothing to do with a general strike, and he starts reading talking points. Oh, the minimum wage is so popular, it won in red states. Oh, look at our policies are so overwhelmingly popular, and we're leading this movement, and yada yada yada. His same old scripted ass talking points that he just repeats nonstop. And so now let me get into what I really wanted to get into, which is basically Bernie's refusal to support a general strike. Everyone in my audience, you know how dire the situation is right now. I talk about it all the time. Other YouTubers you guys listen to talk about it all the time. These numbers are all over Twitter, all over social media. 60 million people lost their jobs this year. 60% of small businesses who closed because of COVID, or 60% of businesses that closed because of COVID, closed permanently. 40 million people are about to be evicted in the middle of a pandemic and economic crisis. 40 million people in this country are about to be evicted. Months behind on rent. That's the reality. A third of the country has no healthcare in the middle of a raging, deadly pandemic. If they didn't have healthcare during normal circumstances, that'd be unacceptable and untenable, public health emergency. But during a deadly pandemic, a third of the country doesn't have healthcare, can't afford healthcare. The situation is as dire as it gets right now. It is as bad as you can possibly imagine. So at this moment, all options should be on the table. If you're actually fighting for the public, all options are on the table right now. We see the government abandoned us. We see that they left us for dead, and they had absolutely no interest in helping anybody. The only concern that they've had for the last 8 months was, like I said, to make sure that they can help the rich run out the back door with all the money in the middle of a fucking crisis, like criminals and thieves and robbers. That's what the government did. When they're supposed to be helping the public, the whole purpose of government is to help the public in times of a need. During the worst emergency in U.S. history, all they were concerned about was helping the rich run out the back door with all the money like fucking common criminals. That's what our government did. And there's no amount of talking to them, you're not going to change their mind. Bernie Sanders just did an 8-hour floor speech trying to get some shitty $1,200 check into the stimulus negotiations as if that's going to help anybody. There's no amount of talking to these people, calling them on the phone, that's going to change their mind. So knowing that they don't give a fuck, knowing that of their own volition, they will do nothing to help the public. So, like I said, all options are on the table, and people who have an elementary understanding of politics, who have the most basic understanding of politics, they think just because people like Bernie Sanders and AOC, they aren't the majority of Congress or the majority of the Senate, they think that they have no power. They think that the only thing that they can possibly do is make these suggestions and present it to other members of Congress, and if they still don't have a majority on their side, well, oh, throw your hands up, there's nothing we can do. No, that's just the first step. That is the very, very first step in what you can do to get UBI if you actually want it, to get Medicare for all if you actually want it. Just bringing it up and trying to negotiate and say, hey guys, we really need these policies to help our constituents. And if you still don't have a majority, that doesn't mean you just pack your shit up and go home with your tail between your legs. That means you move on to the next step. That's a public pressure campaign. That's protest. That's strikes. That's a general strike. Those are tools that you have at your disposal if you want to actually get what you need and you're not in the majority. Being in the minority doesn't mean you get absolutely nothing you want ever. All that means is you have to work a little bit harder. That means instead of just having the power outright to do what you want, having the votes outright to do what you want, having the power of the Speaker of the House to put it for a vote whatever policies you want, instead of having power like that, you have leverage. You have moments where you can make the lives of anybody who's in opposition to you very, very difficult. So much to the point where their only options are to cave to your demands or continue to deal with the public pressure campaign. And once the pressure gets so hot and it's so overwhelming, well, that position is untenable, and their only option is to give you what you want. That's how you get what you want when you're in the minority in Congress. So like I said, all the other options have been exhausted. You cannot expect them to actually help people out right now of their own volition. That's already out the window. They've had 8 months and they've done the exact opposite of that. They robbed the public of their own when they had the opportunity to help them of their own volition. So that option's off the table. You've done the floor speeches. You've talked for 8 fucking hours and nobody is listening to you. Nobody in the Senate is listening to you. So that option's out the window. So what do you have left? You have public pressure. You have the power of the grassroots army that you amassed over the last 4 years. The millions of people who support you. The over 1 million people who signed up to volunteer for your campaign. Now, if there was ever a time to use that for a public pressure campaign to get the policies that people need right now, it would be right now. It would be right now. And still, Bernie Sanders, like the fucking coward he is, won't even get behind a general strike. Won't get behind any type of public pressure campaign. Won't organize his followers to use the only option, the only tool that they have left, which is public pressure. Bernie Sanders won't do it. He won't do it. And so the question I have to ask is, what are you like? So everybody likes to say, all these apologists for these weak-ass, weak-kneed progressives in Congress, all these apologists, they like to say, oh, they have all these excuses. Oh, we can't do it because, it'll be career suicide for them to take such a public stance against the leadership of the Democratic Party. Oh, they can't do it because then they won't get good committee assignments. Oh, they can't do it because they're ruining their chances of running for higher office if they go against the Democratic Party so publicly. All of that shit, it means nothing right now. All of that means nothing. Because I've explained already how dire the situation is. It is existential for millions of people in this country. It is life or death for millions of people in this country. We are in the worst crisis in U.S. history. If you aren't willing to exercise any leverage to pressure your own leadership, to pressure your own party that controls the House of Representatives, that controls the White House, if you aren't willing to do any of that in the worst crisis in history, then you were never going to do it. Then I can't imagine a scenario where you would have actually went balls to the wall, where you would have actually pulled out all the stops, used all the tools at your disposal to force Nancy Pelosi, to force the corporate Democrats, to force the Republicans, to force whoever to pass Medicare for all. Because if you won't do it now, in the middle of the worst crisis in history, then you are never going to do it. You were never going to do it. You were all talk. You were just flapping your gums, pretending like you were these big, bold revolutionaries, anti-establishment politicians. But reality, you aren't that much different from the rest of them. You are still really just trying to maintain the status quo and make life a little bit better for people. And you'll pay a whole lot of lip service to the policies that we should actually have, but you're never going to do anything to get it. So I'm telling people, you need to abandon Bernie Sanders, because if you follow his lead, you follow the lead of people like Ro Khanna. You remember the video I did about Ro Khanna and what he's doing apologetics for Nancy Pelosi and the corruption in the Democratic Party, acting like they weren't blocking Medicare for all for their corporate donors in the private health insurance industry and big pharma. If you follow their lead, if you follow the lead of AOC just fucking tweeting about, oh, it's just the Republicans' fault, Republicans bad, Democrats good and all that shit. If you follow their lead, you aren't going to get shit. They will let you starve in the street. The thousands and thousands of people waiting in lines across miles long lines in every city across the country for food because they can't afford to feed their family. All those people, they aren't going to get shit. If you follow their lead, the 40 million people who are about to be evicted, they're going to get their ass thrown out on the street because what their strategy is to lay down, accept that we're going to get screwed, and just blame the Republicans for everything. That's not a strategy. You're not going to get Medicare for all like that at all. So I'm telling you, it's gone from these elected progressives are just shitting the bed at every turn to where they're now redirecting the energy from where it should be, direct actions and strikes, general strikes, redirecting that energy to bullshit like volunteering for progressives running for office or doing bullshit phone calls to representatives and asking them to not murder their own constituents for corporate greed. Like, they have become a hindrance to the movement. They become a roadblock to the movement. And the longer it takes people to understand that they aren't on your side, fuck the rhetoric, fuck the tweets, fuck all the fancy speeches about the good policies we should have. They aren't really on your side because they aren't willing to do what it takes at all costs to get the policies that they want. They're willing to just do what they feel comfortable with and color within the lines and stay within the bounds that the establishment sets for them. The leadership of the Democratic Party says to them. The leadership of the Democratic Party don't want people out in the streets protesting, doing general strikes. They don't want that. They don't want that because they know it would be effective. And guess who else doesn't want it? Guess who else doesn't support it? Bernie fucking Sanders. Even though we all agree, see it in this channel all the time, see it in the comment section all the time, we all agree there is no other way. Nobody is going to save us. The only way we get anything is if we shut shit down and if we're in the streets like how they are in France or like how they are in India with these giant protests putting immense pressure on politicians, untenable pressure on the politicians until they ultimately cave to their demands. That is the only way we get anything. And guess what? Bernie Sanders is against that. He's against the last card we have up our sleeve to play. And he's going to tell you to roll over and take it from the establishment.